Hi everyone, my name is Sonam and I'm a resident doctor specializing in sports and exercise medicine. Today I wanted to talk to you about some really interesting news in Formula One. Lewis Hamilton, arguably one of the most decorated athletes in Formula One, recently tested positive for COVID-19, causing him to miss the second last race of the season. Now he was lucky enough to return back for the last race in Abu Dhabi, but Hamilton himself reports that he had quite a lot of symptoms or quite a difficult time recovering from the virus and felt lucky to be alive. Today, I wanted to speak with you about two important topics. The first is the effects of COVID 19 on professional athletes, and the second is merely to discuss how Hamilton was able to return back to sport so quickly. Many know that COVID 19 can affect almost any system in the body. Most notably, people know it to cause breathing problems. However, most importantly, COVID 19 has been found to affect systems of the heart, which is extremely important in professional athletes or extremely active young individuals. Some of these complications include heart failure, so the heart not pumping properly, myocarditis, an inflammation of the heart, and arrhythmias, which means that the heart is beating irregularly. Having these complications and stressing your heart can put you at high risk of sudden cardiac death, which is why it is so important to be aware of these complications in the realm of professional athletes. I have personally seen this illness take out young, healthy, active individuals for months on end. And knowing that these cardiac complications can cause sudden death and serious other side effects means that we need to take this seriously when clearing our athletes back to competition. Now, since we are in a global pandemic, multiple governing bodies in the world are coming together and publishing different guidelines. And the British Journal of Sports Medicine was able to finally consolidate this and published two return to play guidelines after amalgamating all this information. They come together with really nice infographics so they're easy to read and easy to reference. We're going to go over one right now.
Okay, so this is the infographic that summarizes the clinical recommendations for return to play following a COVID-19 infection. This was published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine quite recently, and I'll put a link in the description for that article for those who are interested. And the reason why I like this one more than the other is that this infographic is very simple to follow and provides succinct recommendations from a multitude of governing bodies. So let's go through this, pretending that Lewis Hamilton is our test subject. So first off, the first thing that you need to do is let's figure out, okay, so Lewis Hamilton got the infection or tested positive November 30th, and he was racing December 11th to the 13th, that weekend in Abu Dhabi. I may be off by a day. Okay, so first let's figure out which group Hamilton was in. Based off of the news reports, it seems that Hamilton was in group number 3 and that he had mild symptoms, only needing outpatient treatment. So we did not need to go to a hospital. So let's continue to circle 3 so we can work our way down. So if Lewis Hamilton was in group number 3, let's see what he will need for testing and assessment prior to being cleared for return to sport. Now, check marks mean things are mandatory, X means that they're not mandatory, and the square means only if clinically indicated. So if we're worried as their physicians. So he would need a history from a doctor, he would need to be symptom-free, he'd need an examination, which are all things that likely he would have had for sure. Now, these two are interesting in that they recommend that training only be resumed after 14 days of quarantine and a further 2 weeks of social distancing while they're training. Now, Hamilton returned back to training 7 days after testing positive and actually competed 11 days afterwards, or 10 to 11 days afterwards. Now, it is important to note these are not laws, so they're not set in stone, but more recommendations. Likely, Hamilton did discuss with his team prior to returning to training in sport to see if it was okay with local public health authorities. Now, if we move on to the heart tests that we would need to do, for someone in group 3, they would need a resting 12-lead ECG. What is that? It's essentially stickers on the heart that produce a squiggly line, such as this one. And it means something to us, I promise. It lets us know that the heart is functioning properly. Now, these tests here only need to be done if needed. And the blood tests look for markers of heart damage, markers of heart failure, and markers of body inflammation, which tell us quite a lot. An ECG stress test is us putting that ECG sticker on their heart, putting them on a treadmill and getting them to stress their heart to make sure their heart performs properly under stress. And lastly, a cardiac echo is an ultrasound of the heart to look at the structures within the heart and make sure that the heart is contracting appropriately. Now, if we move on to lung tests, right there. So these are the lung tests. As you can see, none of them are absolutely required for group number 3, but these two are required only if we are concerned. Essentially, these two tests, spirometry looks at the lung volumes and whether or not we can exchange gases appropriately, and the cardiac testing looks at lung function when the body is stressed and you are working out.
So quite simply, how was Hamilton able to return to sport so quickly? Well, I can't speak personally for the level of testing and investigation that he did have. Arguably, being a Formula One athlete, he had all the consultants, specialists, and testing at his disposal if he needed them. Now, if we're basing our recommendation solely off the guidelines that we reviewed today, arguably, Hamilton did perhaps return slightly too early, given that he was still experiencing symptoms. After the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, Hamilton himself wrote that he was still having quite a lot of breathing difficulties while in the cockpit of his car, likely contributing to his third place finish. So this brings up a really interesting point on return to play in professional athletes. Professional athletes are just that. Their one and only job is to get back to the sport that they've trained night and day to perform in. We can only imagine that Lewis Hamilton and his medical team sat down and discussed the benefits and risks of return to sport prior to him getting into that car in Abu Dhabi. Overall, I'm glad he's feeling better, and I'm glad that he was able to still put in a third place finish. If you enjoyed this content, please like this video. If you want to see more content in relation to anatomy, biomechanics, and the effects that injuries have on professional athletes and their teams, please subscribe to my channel. For now, that's all.